Hey, well, welcome everyone to another Risk and Margin Talks. I'm Mark Smith with Mission Centered Solutions, and with me is Joel Lane. And we have both been vaccinated as part of this project that we were working on together right now. And we're coming to you from Joint Forces Training Base, Los Alamitos, which is where Joel's aircraft Intel 24 is based. And that is relevant because Joel is one of the Air Tactical Group Supervisors, ATGSs, that really founded and created the program that is the Fire Integrated Real-Time Intelligence System, or FIRIS, which is an aerial intelligence platform that supports reconnaissance and intelligence for all hazard incidents anywhere in California, and primarily supporting the tactical, operational, and strategic decision making within that initial attack time frame to make those mutual aid decisions. So kind of one of the things that really got me excited about your unique perspective on risk is not only have you been a practitioner for a really long time, but also you have done a lot of research and attempted to quantify that risk versus gain decision making around the use of aircraft, like in fire suppression and so forth. So I think that that's a unique dimension, right? So Joel, just give us a little bit about your journey from sort of where you started to where you're at now.
Sure. I left high school in 1979 and wanted to go to college, but you need money to do that. And so I came from a small family. Had an older sister who did very well in school. I had an older brother who was commissioned into the Navy right out of high school. Very intelligent. Sister did really well. I didn't do so well. So
well, that's why I joined another one of those flights.
And so I found myself on a hotshot crew, Texas Canyon Hotshots in 1979, making what I thought at the time was pretty good money, and that became a career. So 13 years on hotshot crews between South Ops and North Ops. Was on Mendocino shots for a while. And a 6-year stint as an engine captain, very busy house on I-5, Angeles National Forest. And about 20 years on the ground, 22 years on the ground, and about 22 years then in the air. So I worked for an engine captain, very aggressive engine captain who was also an air attack. And he was very, very adamant about his employees, his engineers, his firefighters having something else on the qualification card in case you lost the ability of your back, your legs.
High probability, right?
High probability.
That's a leader thinking about risk versus gain of their people.
Yeah.
Of her people or his people, saying, hey, we shit happens, right? We can't do this forever. Stuff happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So Bill Pierce, pretty much I wasn't going to be a dispatcher. I wasn't going to do ground support in camp. So he was an air attack. And to tell you the truth, Mark, I did not like to fly.
Oh my God, you picked the wrong time.
I hated it. My wife being a flight attendant when we first met, it took everything even to fly, commercial. I just hated aircraft. So it was a challenge. It really was. It was a big challenge. But so 22 years, retired from the Forest Service 2018 as a Forced Aviation Officer on Sequoia, and had a long time standing history with Brian Fennessy back in his federal days.
So that's Chief Fennessy of the Orange County Fire Authority.
Correct.
And they're, primarily hosting the FIRIS program.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So some calls were made, and others were already here building this program, and they had done similar things, tried to do similar things when Chief Fennessy was with San Diego City. And so it just worked out. I retired for about 3 days, and here I am. Been doing this for 3 years now.
That's cool. So that gives a lot of perspective on risk. And I guess the first thing, how in your mind, your calculus, how do you define risk?
Well, I tell you, I knew this question was coming, and I saw a couple of the other interviews, and It's everything from what everything is, what everybody thinks it is, and what everybody has said it is. I view it. I'm a little bit of an abstract thinker, and I think risk for my job now and what I did in the early days is assumptions. I really think assuming that you know what I know and you assuming that I know what you know is a very, very risky place to be, and we dwell in that arena every day.
Particularly when the time compression doesn't leave any margin, right? It's like, oh, I didn't realize that's what you were thinking. Oh, well, let's go back to Home Depot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in the air, these are in very unforgiving environments as far as time, and the penalty of that assumption is...
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And everybody in grade school, right? We all had those math problems, those word problems. A train leaves Dallas and a train leaves Chicago.
Yeah.
Nobody liked those problems.
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, even somebody that has a mathematical master's degree hates that question still. That's well in firefighting.
And I gotta just laugh out loud because I was just helping my 12-year-old granddaughter with one of those. And the first things out of my mouth are like, okay, honey, so you got to break this down. Let's start at the end and backwards plan.
Exactly.
Right? And that's where those skills come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right, time compression.
That's how you make margin, right?
The reason why you don't like that problem is because it's timed. It's a timed problem. It's a moving mathematical harmonic. It's harmonic calculus, but so it's tough. And that's why we get to situations that we do with bad outcomes, is we allow ourselves to get into that, and without recognizing it, assuming that we're going to be good, and we're not.
So with that then, how do you consider yourself a risk taker?
From a very, very early age, I look back, and a lot of things I did, you almost have to look backwards, right? And kind of go, wow, that didn't seem really too bad at the time. And later on, you just go, man, like right now, I decided when I turned 59, going to be 60. When I turned 50, I turned 18 on Texas Canyon Hot Shots, and I thought it'd be great to turn 50 on that crew. And I went back, and man, what an eye-opener. Besides the physical, getting beat up, but just the way a hotshot crew thinks, the way they use their time, they're smart, man. And I came out of that, leaving the crews back in the 90s, and then going back when I was 50. They're smarter, they're faster, they're stronger. And if you don't recognize that, if you don't accept that, you're the one
You're the anachronism.
You are.
Yeah. You're the weak link.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess how risky do you think your job is? Like originally you didn't want to fly, let's say, and was that a fear-based thing, or was that some other thing? And obviously that's changed till now.
Yeah, I was afraid of crashing an airplane. I think airplanes fall out of the sky. That was my thing. Airplanes are dangerous. So it took a while, but here I was. You asked me about am I a risk taker? I would, to answer that question, I would say I'm a risk receiver. I will take risk, right? I'm surely not just going to go out and look for it, but overcoming that in an aircraft was pretty. I didn't feel comfortable in an airplane. I got signed off. First 3 years, I really wasn't comfortable in an airplane until I went through some things and found out that this is actually a pretty.
Like if we survived that and didn't crash, I guess this thing can stay up in the air.
Yeah,
right?
When you're looking out the right window all the time, you're going, "Wow, I'd much rather be here than there." It opened my eyes, and I got comfortable with it, and it's great. I'd much prefer sitting in a seat in the sky right now than this one.
So within that aviation context, what is the most dangerous part of that job, do you think, now?
Not having control. I mean, I hop, this phone could go off right now, right? And I'm going. And boy, you go upstream of everything that connects that.
Yeah.
Right? This company hired mechanics. Where these guys come from? What are they doing? What was done on that plane 3 weeks ago? And then you have a pilot, you know them, but do you know them? So there's a lot of things
Because it's the nature where, it's mix and match, right? Like so many of our systems where it's plug and play, and you're expected to know the drill, know the SOPs, and fit in and make that crew work.
Exactly. So if something's not right, there's a lot of chances I'm not going to know about that.
Yeah.
Right. And I've dealt with that before in the air.
So what do you think people outside, even within the emergency response community, how is your understanding of the reality of the risks of the aviation types of programs different than what my perspective would be as, I know the world, I'm part of the operational world, but I don't maybe know that intimately. I'm not an aviation person, although I ride in and jump out of them, land in them,
I think every large organization, such as the one I came from, even smaller organizations that have complex systems, that have complex programs, you always have those, they seem to dwell in about a middle management, area that want to be tip of the spear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's their job kind of to be, but if they don't delegate that, and we talk about leaders' intent, right? Having good leaders' intent, and having if they're not willing to give some of that control up and actually learn from those that are actually doing that job, then I think there's perceptions that are way off of, if you're not an operator, but you're managing an operation, well, then they're going to have a completely different outlook on
Well, that's being open to constant. Well, and then there's your assumptions, because unless you are actively learning, open mind learning from your sub leaders, or your people, you're cutting off your situation awareness cycle, and therefore the danger of an assumption is going to increase over time, right? Because there's no new inputs coming.
And how many years have you gone on in an operation that way? And you just went, holy cow, I wish I would have known this yesterday, or 2 years ago.
So how, particularly, in an airplane, you can't stop and think about things for a second, right? Well, you can, right? But let's talk about the perception of risk. How do people in your role perceive risk changing real time?
I think, we talk about tactical pauses a lot, and we do that in training. I do not think we do it enough in the real world. When you're engaged and you're in the operation, sometimes you let things take you by surprise, and then you just neutralize that situation by getting used to it. One of the things I taught for a long time, I was a trainer for ATGSs, for air techs for a long time, and just like me, it took a long time to get really comfortable. And one of the things you got to do is you got to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Amen. I always call it learn to be unafraid of being afraid.
And
otherwise,
afraid
you can't.
Being afraid is good stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think it is, man. When I get that, when I get that pending doom, climbing the rope in gym class feeling, I know that's like it's telling me. So I will slow down, and you can go out here on any given day. People stereotype California as in aerial supervision as like the place. It's not, they're afraid of it. They won't come here. And to me, it's the easiest place to do aerial supervision in the world. Everybody knows what to do. They show up. If you never said anything, not one word, 4-hour mission, these guys will pull it off. Gals easily pull it off. They do it every day. It's when you get to those places you don't expect it, assumptions.
Maybe the lower frequency, still high consequence, right?
Exactly.
Here, it's maybe high frequency, high consequence.
Right.
So everybody's ready to switch on pretty quickly. Other places, it's low frequency, but still extremely high consequence.
And that's where I think you're peaking in the red. I really do. And you operate that in that level day in and day out with people that aren't, they're just not used to being in that role. To me, is a much dangerous place to be than every day in it. And get back to your question. I think you slow down. You go slow to go fast. And as an air tech, you have to do that. You're actually controlling the tempo. So you get up to a 16-piece drum set pretty quick, and you gotta ratchet it down to one snare drum. and just, one snare drum, and then once you get that under control, add another drum.
I think that's kind of the ground equivalent of fall back to that anchor point, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's sort of your aerial anchor point is
Exactly.
the one aircraft doing the one task at the place it's needed the most. Was there and you kind of, you almost touched on it a couple times, but was there a time when you realized, like, so suddenly that your risk profile had changed and you weren't keeping up with it? You realized you were behind the power curve, and it was like a real oh shit type of.
Yeah, on the ground, it happened quite a bit, but I was promoted very young, hung a radio on me very young. Somebody had some confidence in me, and boy, that being in the backseat of a buggy to being in the front seat of the buggy, it's just that short movement is the biggest move in your life, right? And so, we showed up in Yellowstone, and the day it hit the lodge, and 1988, and I just remember being, I'd been doing this for 10 years in 1988, right? And I'll tell you, 10 years is enough time to do it long enough to not know anything.
Yeah.
And so, got time for a quick story. We were in an in briefing, and I was with the engine foreman, Bill Pierce, the guy that got me into this. And we're in this briefing, and it's 1,500, 1,800 people.
Wow.
And this thing's coming to the lodge. I mean, it's the day it's coming to the lodge, and the IC's up on the stage, big, huge stage, and he's directing. And we're going to war, and I'm just sitting there, just kind of laughing about it, And Bill Pierce, the captain, is whispering in my ear, and this guy's like, "Oh, we're gonna save the lodge, and we will." Teddy Roosevelt stayed in this lodge. And it's a big thing, And I'm thinking to myself, man, there's 1 million acres of lodgepole pine building. And so Pierce is in my ear, he's whispering, he's like, "We're gonna save the lodge, and we're gonna, And I'm like, I've got 500 gallons of water and 1 million acres of lodgepole pine. When you do the math.
Right.
And then he's like, "No, we're going to save the lodge." And he's all up on it. We're going to go get some fusees and get all this stuff. And I finally told him, I go, "Hey, man, this lodge is actually built out of the same thing instead of farming in 1 million acres. And then not only that, they covered it in varnish, So,
right.
So, I mean.
In case it wasn't flammable enough.
Yeah. And so within, quarter of that mission, halfway through that day, we found ourselves having to, you had to move. You go to Yellowstone, everybody in Yellowstone, it's a huge parking lot.
Yeah.
It's like going to Disneyland parking lot.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is no problem. But we have this dial. It wasn't big enough. You to stay alive, you had to move. And there's one point, it was a National Geographic photo. It's on the front page. It shows an engine. It's our engine. I'm driving this engine inside the parking lot. And if you look close, it's on fire. There's the hose on top is on fire. And it's kind of a Far Side cartoon moment. You're driving a fire truck.
That's on fire.
Yeah, it's on fire. And so we had to stop and engage the pump, put ourselves out. And it was I came home from that and pretty much closed myself in an office for a while. And because we almost, multiple times almost got burned over.
Yeah.
It was close. And I go, man, I'm responsible for people now. I have, a lot of responsibility. And that's when I really started learning about fire behavior and taking what the science side of it, which I think this agency or all wildland fire agencies have a long way to go to really understanding the science. Science has a lot to offer right now in our business. So.
Yeah, well, that part, because now you're talking about quantifying, right, with science. You're talking so much of what we have to do in these dynamic, tactical, operational worlds is intuitive decision making, intuitive risk management, right? And so, you're taking, like you said, all your pre-conscious indicators, and you're bringing those in, and then you start thinking. So that's a little bit of analytics. It's still intuitive, but the quantification, that's the missing piece, and that's science-based. That's kind of what with the FIRIS program that you're in now, why it's so exciting, is because there is a supercomputer that your aircraft talks to, and the modelers, and so it kind of leads me to the next thing, is that let's take it within this FIRIS program of what you're doing. How do you all talk about risk? how do you communicate about risk?
Well, I think we can do it, easily. We can now do it easily without communicating. We can do it in a picture. I can send you a picture on your iPhone in seconds. That's real time is in our name, and so to me, when I first saw that ETA photo coming out of Wi-Fi, that to me that was a game changer. I hadn't seen an advancement in wildland firefighting.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the next
game changer. Right?
I think it's the next Pulaski.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it is when you can look at something. Children illustration books, right? That's what they do. They teach you how to read by looking at pictures, and then you associate.
Yeah,
and that's what that is.
And certainly the power of everything that's going on with the modeling and the supercomputer and all that. There's a lot of product that's out there for the higher levels.
Yeah,
logging in and stuff. But when you are on the incident, a division, you look at a smartphone, and like you said, here's the picture, and the typical product is. Here's the 3-hour model without any kind of suppression or intervention.
Yep.
That's perfect for a risk because that's the risk I'm taking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if it's wrong, it's wrong. But if it's not wrong, now you have something to gauge it by, right?
Yeah. Or you at least have that start point playbook.
Yeah.
And then now take that within. So let's take that from a program level into the cockpit level, or the cabin, I should say, because you fly with a pilot and you fly with a sensor operator in the back. And the unique thing about your aircraft is the sensor operator and you have no visual contact because of all the stuff.
Right.
So how do you communicate? What's your risk language as a crew?
Well, we do a lot of pre-planning before we go. So we're gonna meet at stop. I mean, a typical mission is get to the plane, and then we do some pre-briefing. PIC is PIC, right? Pilot in command. He or she has the overall. That it's his ship, right? And we all at that point, it's up to him. So we mission plan in the air. As things change, we call a lot of audibles. We go to the line. We see that back is now moving. We change things, and so we do it internal cockpit.
And there is a lot of that conversation going on. I've heard that in my time in the aircraft.
Yeah.
I've heard this constant. It's one of the most impressive things about the crew because you're bringing in the strengths of each one of the three to in a real collaborative way of solving problems and managing those risks, right? Because the optimal flight envelope is not optimal for the sensor, and the optimal sensor is not optimal for you to communicate. And so it's a constant dialogue to balance these risks in order to be the most effective.
You're constantly pivoting, and flying down here in SoCal, it's really busy airspace, and now we're at altitudes that we're, when you start looking at the Class Bravo airspace down here, it's crazy what's in it. So the pilot's working harder than we are down here.
Yeah.
And that's typical in an ATGS mission as well. The pilot's working just as hard as you are. And, because we're outside of that fire traffic area, we're outside of the temporary flight restrictions. So we're being controlled. But, and then the sensor operator needs what he or she needs as well to get that product built. And so it's collaboration, a lot of CRM. Really high-end CRM.
The crew resource management.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I guess, for you personally, when you're making these risk decisions, what's your internal calculus like to balance risk versus gain?
Well, there's got to be an end state. You have to have a goal, right? So, Tony Dupre taught me this a long time ago. Have objectives, or you're just falling off. You're jumping off a bridge at night. You just can't see the bottom. So you have to have an end state. You got to have goals, and then it's everything in between that to meet that goal. And then recognizing that if a hurdle comes up, if something comes up, we call them trigger points. Or at least we used to. Now we call them management action points. I think they're going to get back to trigger points, but have those trigger points set. And if you set them, it's easy for a pilot, right? It's really easy for a pilot. 400 pounds of fuel. We're landing, right? That's a trigger point. But because a trigger point is one of the tools to create margin. Exactly.
Your time isn't any different. The time wedge is exactly the same.
Correct.
You can fly this long at this altitude, this temperature, with this much gas, with this much. But when you make a trigger point, you're moving the decision space farther up in the time wedge. So
Exactly.
you're giving yourself
Exactly.
margin. Right.
And we used to do it, I did a lot in right seating in lead planes, right? And it was, trigger point for a lot of lead plane pilots is, 2 wingspans left. Right? Now we're 4 wingspans left. When you start calling out 6 wingspans left of drift, you're like, okay, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So have a trigger point of when, and flying down here in Santa Ana winds is as safe as it is. You have to have those points, you have to have those objectives that, not meeting the objective could be a trigger point, right? And so you're gonna call it, you're just gonna call it.
Right. It's been X amount of time and we've been ineffective.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's really easy on the ground, if I was gonna deploy a hose lay up the hill, and I get pushed out 3 times, the fire dictates your action. What's funny in aviation is you can just keep doing stupid things. That's
Right.
the weird thing about aviation.
Right.
On the fire line, you get pushed out, RTO with the crew, return, tool order, get out of there, start over again. You can't get away with that on the ground, right? But in the air, boy, aviation can allow you to do some really stupid things for days on end, and we do sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, so that kind of takes me to stories, and you go back to the captain that you had when you were young, and what his experience meant for you to have a backup plan, right, for a job
Right.
and stuff. So, and then you're talking about aviation allows you to do a lot of stupid stuff, right? What has been the role of storytelling in your development over 40 years?
Boy, everything. On the ground, that's how you learned. I mean, we didn't have lessons learned. We didn't have a lessons service center. We didn't have refresher trainings.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have crew cohesion, which when I first met with you in '99, I think, in Fresno, we got in those groups and turned the buggy into a helicopter and crashed it. But I mean, we came back to the table. We did those things, right? We did crew cohesion. We did mission statements. We started looking at leadership course curriculum, and I think that was some of the beta testing we were doing back then. But so it all came down to who you worked for. I was really fortunate. I was blessed to work for some great tacticians. Just, people, men and women that just had a great sense of mission accomplishment, mission-driven culture, but they wanted to teach. They were great teachers. You could have taken them right
Because you can have a lot of people that are really great operators, but just don't have the hardware or software to be able to pass it on.
Everybody I worked for, you could take them right off the fire line, put them in a high school classroom, and they would have been great teachers. So I was blessed in that way, and I tried to do that. I tried to return that, because that's everything. And storytelling was part of that. And we've kind of lost sight of that. A lot of it is now social media storytelling. I mean, you do have some of that. But sitting around in aviation, you take off from 6 different places you meet in the airspace. Right. And it's hard not to, not talk to somebody you haven't talked to. And, you know these guys, these gals. And then you go back. So a lot of times you don't get that chance. And when you do, ooh, man, it can be awesome. It can be all-nighters.
Yeah, well, that's where a lot of the bar napkins. Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're all compelled to do that because, in the military, same thing. You in special forces, you don't see your friends sit there. They're 6 months in country X, and you're overlapping 6 months in country Y, and so you come back and maybe you see them going out, and and when you do get together, it's compelling to.
We a lot of times you're being taught, you don't even know it, right?
Right.
And maybe years later, I remember landing in Fox one time, and it was a tanker pilot we had, Tommy Rader, just a great guy, just a really good tanker driver, and he's been retired for a long time, but he said, hey, I want you to come out to the airplane. I hadn't seen him in years, and so I went out to his airplane, and they were changing off a main, so they had a big 16-pound sludge that they were banging off this main with, and he goes, hey, hang on to this. And I'm like, all right, so he's hanging on, and he goes, stick your arm and hold it like this. So I'm like, all right, And so he starts talking about this fire we've been on in Region 3, like 2 years ago, and he goes, so do you remember, you had me holding out, in this canyon, and I'm like,
by now, right.
Yeah, and I'm like, Tom, what's the point of this? And he goes, that's what it feels
Oh,
like.
that's so awesome.
That's energy, dude. That's what you did to me. You did that all day long to me. Don't ever do that again. And I'm like, oh man, I never did that.
And what an imprint, right?
Yeah, he's teaching me energy management with a P2, which is
That's
really
fantastic.
That's hard stuff.
That's
And I just up
fantastic.
there, just do another lap. We're gonna stay here for
Right,
a while.
right.
And he's just like, oh man. So I got taught well.
That's cool. Well, Joel, thank you so much. This has been great. I knew you'd have some fantastic perspectives on this, so I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mark.
And
Thanks for having me, man.
looking forward to working with you some more, man.
Yeah, me too.
All right.